of all, I will be speaking on accommodations and modifications today, and I'm super excited to be here. So my name is Darci Weets. I just wanted to do a short introduction. So I have been teaching and have been blessed enough to teach in the same district for the last 17 years. I currently am a high school special education teacher, and I have been the complete time that I've been here at Hermantown High School is where I teach. My roles have changed along the way, but I've always had at least part-time special education. So I did for a small amount of time teach a little PE, and then did special education in the afternoon and found out it was really challenging not being with my students all day and the types of cleanups that I would have to come back to trying to be split between two buildings. So I did ask to come full-time special education. I do have a background in DCD, which is developmental cognitive disabilities, mild to moderate. That's how I first started out my teaching. I had a wonderful crew. I always say my first 7 years of teaching are really hard to beat because they were just phenomenal. So I'm very grateful for that. And now I cross categorical, I manage across the board. So all of the different disabilities currently, 9 through 12, I am able to case manage. So along with being a high school special education teacher, I've also been adjuncting. I've been adjuncting for St. Scholastica for the last 7 years, which I absolutely love. And I was able to be a part of the ABS licensure program and starting to set that up. So that was wonderful. And I also taught at my alma mater, which is University of Wisconsin-Superior. I did that for a couple of years as well. Along with teaching, you wear many hats. And if you work in a school district or are about to work in a school district, there is no shortage of how individuals can use you. So along with being a teacher, I also taught ESY, which is extended school year for many years. And then I also coordinated it for the last 7. And then I've been a coach. I've coached basketball, I've coached volleyball, and I just gave up volleyball. I coached it for 15 years. So I just gave it up to focus more on other interests a little bit. So I just mentioned that I'm a daughter, sister, aunt, and friend. I'm very tight and close with my family, and we're all in the same region within Minnesota, which is wonderful. And I have many nieces and nephews. I have 8 nieces and nephews. So that fills that portion of not having kiddos of my own. And finally, I'm a friend. And if you see my little picture to the right, I actually had to have this taken for my school. So I thought I'd post it, but I collect sneakers and have collected sneakers for over 20 years. And so the collection is, I have over 300 pairs of sneakers. I took out a pair the other day that I was really curious of when they were made, and it was 2004. So I have a wide range of what I collect, but it's just a little about me. So today I'm going to talk about accommodations and modifications. I want to give us a little time to discuss. So I'll run a breakout room in between where you guys can get together and connect and talk. I like to be informal as well. So if you have any questions or concerns, please feel like you can unmute and make sure to ask a question. And then finally, I do have a favor for you guys. If along the way you could come up with one question, I would really appreciate it. You might feel that your question is not important, but maybe somebody else is thinking the exact same thing. And so I want to make sure that you guys can help me out a little bit and can write down some questions. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and start presenting. I first wanted to give you the definitions of both modifications and accommodations, and then show you a short video. So modifications, the definition is usually take the form of amended materials or assignments and differ from changes in curriculum or instructional strategies. So I like to take the word modifications and break it down to modify. How are you going to modify something, and what does that look like? Looking at accommodations, then the definition is include changes to instruction that don't significantly change the content or conceptual difficulty of the level of curriculum. So that means we're just changing the style of how we are instructing to our students. Maybe that includes showing a presentation for your visual learners. And we'll get more into what those modifications and those accommodations look like. So as a special education teacher, we have to fill out an individualized educational plan every single year. As a general education teacher, if you have that student in your classroom, you then are invited to their IEP meeting every single year, or you should be. This meeting includes the student, the family and guardians, the teachers, district rep, and I always like to include counselors as well if they are available. So at the annual IEP meeting, this is where we discuss the student and we talk about what accommodations or modifications we feel would be appropriate for them and what the setting would be. So these are 4 questions as special education teachers that we need to answer about accommodations and modifications. So we need to make sure we answer the what. What is the specific modification or support needed? So we will be listing what that is. We will be also listing when. When is the conditions that trigger the modification or support? When does that occur? Where are the environments in which the modification or support is needed? So that might be in the general education setting, and it might be specifically in a science room. That would be noted. And then finally, who? Who is responsible for implementing the modification or support? And that could come from the teacher, that could come from a paraprofessional that might be in the setting, or that could come from staff that might be in that setting. So special education teachers need to make sure that we answer the what, when, where, and who when we are looking at accommodations and modifications for specific students. So here is a short movie, video, example that breaks down modifications versus accommodations and gives us some differences and examples. So please tune in. It's around 3 minutes long. right, thank you for viewing that along with me. One thing that I wanted to note here along the way is hopefully you've seen some of these accommodations or modifications before. I know even in my own personal life, highlighting and using color, I use it in so many different ways in life just to draw attention and to mark things off. And so not only are these accommodations and modification areas appropriate for students that are on an IEP, they're definitely appropriate for all students. It can definitely help and assist. So moving on, I wanted to go over sample accommodation and modification areas. So within the IEP that the special education teacher completes, we have 12 different areas that we can list for accommodations and modifications. And so what I did is I broke down each of the 12 areas, and then I gave one example of each. There are many that go along with them, but I at least wanted to try to give you guys each an idea of what they look like. So looking at our 12 areas, our first area is assignments. And an example of an accommodation that could be used with an assignment is maybe the student has really struggles with anxiety and ADHD. And maybe when it comes to presenting in front of that class, they will really struggle. What you can do is for that assignment, maybe you could do an oral presentation in lieu of a paper. Oh, I confused, I wrapped them around, I apologize. So this would be an assignment that maybe this is a research paper that is more lengthy. I know students in our high school setting, when they work on some of their comp papers, they can be 11, 12 pages. Maybe for this assignment for this student, in lieu of the paper, they completed an oral presentation. Maybe it's very important for them to complete that paper, so maybe the length is adjusted instead. But that would be an example of how you could accommodate an assignment. Another area is behavior management. With behavior management, you might have students in your class that are on what's called a behavior intervention plan or a BIP. As a teacher, you will be instructed and you will be notified if you have a student in your classroom that has a plan. So within their behavior management of this student, an example would be staff would positively reinforce on-task behavior. So if Tommy is doing exactly what he needs to do, and usually he isn't, usually he's wandering around the room, we want to make sure we tell him he's doing a really nice job and to keep it up. Another area would be the environment or physical accommodations. So an example of this that is used very frequently, or I use very frequently, is students will be provided with preferential seating. So maybe that student wants to be front, center, in the middle of the class so they have the best view of the teacher. The next one is grading, and this can be a little controversial once in a while. I feel in my setting, I've always been able to come to an agreement with teachers when looking at how students are graded. But once again, this is an IEP team decision, and as a teacher, you are part of that team. So an example for grading is a student could be graded pass fail in a general education class. Now, what does that mean that a student is graded pass fail? That means that that student, I like to say, passed or participated in that class. Instead of receiving a letter grade, then they will receive a pass. I like to use passes when our paraprofessionals really have to tailor down the material, or that students simply just wouldn't be able to make it in that class if it wasn't those extra supports in class. Sometimes you'll get a student who's really like really into Spanish and will want to take a Spanish class in the worst way, but I know academically they will really struggle in there. But we decide we want the student in there, therefore we decide to grade them on a pass-fail basis. If they participate, if they're involved, and the teacher feels they complete enough to earn that passing grade, we then use a passing grade. Instructional materials are another area. So a student will be provided a copy of a teacher's notes. This would be a great example of how you could assist the student with instructional materials. If you did not want to use your notes, you sure could use the paraprofessional notes if you had a paraprofessional in your setting, or you could use the peer notes. If you have a student in the class that you know takes really good notes, you could use that peer's notes for those students. The next area is organization, and this area is really difficult for a lot of individuals, but in the organizational area, the example I gave is teacher will review an initial student's planners. Things have become more digital these days, but sometimes that piece of paper, that planner, students can be really by the book by it and like to follow it. And I myself know I like to highlight and cross things off. So I still like to use that planner. It's up to the students, you know, if they would prefer a digital version versus a paper version. Pacing, this is another area. So for example, a student will be provided with additional time to complete assignments. So that is another team decision. Within my setting, my high school special education team, we've all agreed upon that we like to give 3 extra school days. This also goes along with the student advocating for themselves and asking for that extra time. Does this always happen? No, it doesn't. Is this something that I work on with students regularly? Yes, I want them to advocate for themselves, and I definitely want them to advocate ahead of time. They shouldn't be asking for additional time at the last minute, okay? They should realize they're going to need more time and ask ahead of time. The next area is self-management. So an example of that is teacher will ask student to repeat instructions to ensure that understanding. Did the student understand the directions you just gave? Health and medication is another area. There are students that are on IEPs due to their health and medical condition. So this example could be simply a student will carry an EpiPen while they are at school if they have an allergy, a severe allergy at that. Next would be instruction. An example of instruction is the teacher in consultation with the case manager will break down classroom assignments. So as the teacher, you are the expert in your area, and bringing in that case manager, they are the experts in the special education field. So the two of you together should work together to break down the assignments. Currently within my role, I'm a co-teacher and have been a co-teacher the last 7 years, and I absolutely love it. And together we work on the materials, assignments, tests together. We adapt them together and change them together to make sure we both are on the exact same page. So please, if you are that general ed teacher, make sure to pull in that special education teacher to assist and instruct. You may also have a paraprofessional that feels very comfortable and confident, and they might want to adjust the material. That is not their job, but if they want to and are willing to, and you as the teacher and the case manager feel comfortable and you all agree, that is something that could occur as well. Sensory impairments, this is both hearing and vision. So Textbook will be provided in Braille format. That would be an example for a student that was visually impaired. An example for a student with a hearing deficiency, a student will be able to use a personal wireless amplification system, or they are called an FM system. And you maybe have used one before. If you haven't, they're not super difficult to run. It is a microphone system that you carry around your neck. I actually have a lanyard on right now. It's almost the size of my lanyard, I would say. So the one thing to remember, if you have an amplification system for a student that you are wearing, is when you step away or you're having side conversations, you gotta remember to mute, okay? Because many students have heard things that they probably haven't needed to heard, or heard private conversations just because that extra step of forgetting to mute. So closing it up then, testing is another area that accommodations and modifications can be listed for. An example of what an accommodation could be for testing would be classroom tests will be read aloud within a special education classroom. So therefore that classroom is smaller. A lot of times what we do as well, I'm in the high school setting, is we will have students meet staff at a room to meet up. Therefore, they don't have to be pulled directly out of class. So moving on, ways to modify. There are 3 ways to modify curriculum. So first of all, we can provide supports. Second of all, we can reduce the workload. And third, we can modify the content. So what exactly do those 3 look like? So provide supports. Here are some examples. It can go it can go further, but to get you started, here are some examples or ways you could provide supports. So give a word bank to fill in the blank or when writing an essay. Allow students to type or orally report their responses. Give a specific list for steps to complete a task. I really like that one, and they can cross off when they do it. Provide concept cards with an assignment. Allow the student to use their books or notes. That's another one that is pretty popular. You could provide an example if the student is confused or unsure of something. Highlight those tricky or key words in question. Allow for extra time. Allow for a quieter setting. Allow calculators. Allow for brainstorming prior to the assignment. And then have an adult read assignment to the student. So those are some wonderful examples of ways as a teacher you can provide support. Moving on to reduce the workload. So this too, I always like to say, I want to challenge my students as much as possible. I want my students hitting that bar. I want them as close to their peers as it can be. So ways where it can reduce the workload, you still want to make sure they understand the concept. And last year during COVID, when teachers were teaching during the hybrid scenario method, I really saw, and my administrator really suggested that we clean up our curriculum and focus on the main. What exactly are the main topics that we need our students to pull from the chapter that we are working on? But the assignments that we were giving that were more busy work, we kind of pulled them back and focused on what was the most important, and we needed to hone it in on that. So ways to reduce the workload. This is one that is used in my setting often. Assign even or odd problems only. Now, make sure they're still understanding that concept, but a student that has a difficult time processing, it's going to take them twice as long, maybe 3 times as long as their peer to get through and work through those problems. So it's not that they don't want to complete the problems, it's that it takes them that extra time to complete those problems. You could select specific problems and omit extra ones. Excuse me. You could give 1 essay question instead of 3 or 4, or what I like to do is tailor it down in half. Maybe you can give 2 questions instead of the 4. Give choice. Let the students select 10 problems to do, or let them pick whether to do the front or back of a worksheet. This will help with motivation too, since the child sees they have a choice. So that's a good one to remember as well. Put fewer problems on each page. This would make it less distracting for a learner. For matching, reduce the number of items to match or break them into half. And I kind of will show you an example of that later, of ways to color code or to break things into half. Reduce the number of multiple choice options. I have an example of this as well. For example, if the quiz has 4 possible multiple choice answers, your student might only have 2 or 3 to choose from. And then finally, eliminate true or false questions. This can be tricky for certain individuals. Finally, the last area is modify the content. So give a similar but different assignment with lower grade level material in the area of weakness. So maybe in the math, reading, or writing areas. Provide an alternative assignment. So maybe instead of a research project, or maybe you give a research project over completing a handwritten paper, or you do a hands-on project, a lab experiment. So just providing a different assignment, but still making sure the student knows the same content. And then finally, align student interests to the content. So find or focus on reading strategies while learning about trains if that student is interested in trains. So here are 2 examples of modified curriculum. The first, these are from high school chemistry classes, just so if you're wondering where the material came from. So these are an example of what I have used co-teaching in my setting. So the first example is just multiple choice. Normally we would lay out 4. Instead of 4, we've reduced 1 and we've given 3. What you could also do, if 3 is too challenging, you can cross out another one and give 2. So that would be a way to modify a multiple choice question. The next is filling in the blanks. And what I did is I just took a smaller section. So we're asking 5 different questions. I have 11, 12, and 13 highlighted in green. That means the student is going to know that 11, 12, and 13 come from the highlighted green vocabulary words. So if it is not highlighted, they should not pick it. So therefore, tailoring it down for them. So I just wanted to do a really quick breakout activity. We are getting really close to the end here. I have about 10 minutes. It looks, no, wait, I go until 3 o'clock, lying. We have about 20 minutes left. So I would like to break out into rooms for the next 10 minutes, I would say, and then we can come together and do a close. But within this breakout room, and if you get done sooner, please come back. If you don't need that much time, maybe you only need 5. But within your breakout room, please make an accommodations modifications list that you would like to use in the future. So maybe you want to highlight materials for your student, and that's something you want to use in the future. Maybe you would like to use word banks. So please, within your group, make a short list, and let's gather back here together in about 10 minutes. If you need to take a break and go to the washroom as well, you could sure do that if you needed during that time. So breaking you out into groups, and I'll see you back here in a couple of minutes. Everyone. All right, everyone, welcome back. I hope you had some great conversation. I would love to hear just a little bit from you guys. So I asked along the way if maybe you could write down a question or if you had a thought, maybe within your breakout room, you guys were talking about accommodations and modifications, and there's some that you see would hit with a particular student or that you want to use. So from breakout room number 1, would anybody like to share what you guys discussed and talked about? Maybe something that you want to try this next school year that you want to try with a new student?
I think I was part of that room, I
Sounds
think.
good, Nathan. Yeah, what are you thinking?
So I first talked about ebooks with text to speech, and let's see here.
Yeah, ebooks is a really, really good one.
Pauline discussed that as well, because she's also into computer science.
Okay.
And she also mentioned choices, and it was Jen mentioned breaks are very important, especially, well, I said for everybody, but she said especially for those with behavior issues.
Yeah, and students that are on the spectrum as well, those sensory breaks, they'll definitely need time away from the computer, and they hit a level where it's too much going on around them once in a while, where they just need that quiet room or that quiet setting, or they just need a place they can decompress. So those are all wonderful. Do you have any others that you would like to talk about or include? But those are all great examples of accommodations.
Well, I also mentioned accessibility settings in devices, and there was one question by Jen about accommodation for a student that doesn't have a plan.
Yeah, so what we like to hit in teaching is called universal design for learning. So as an educator, it should be our goal to hit every single student that we are teaching to. And using that universal design for learning, what you might find out is a lot of students, not only one, might benefit from a PowerPoint presentation or a slideshow. Maybe all the students in the classroom will benefit from you allowing them to take out their notes and using them for 5 minutes. Maybe all students will benefit from your lights are extremely bright and you decide to bring them down a little bit because of sensory. That might help them. So just because a student isn't specifically on an IEP or on a 504 doesn't mean that we still can't accommodate them. So our goal should be to try to accommodate them all to the fullest as we can, and hopefully hit, if one accommodation works for one student, it might be beneficial for more than one. And if not, sometimes the students don't know the difference. Back in the day when we took paper tests, we would have different tests for our students that were in special education that were already modified. The other students had no clue those students were taking a modified test. It was just the way we passed them out, and we made sure the right test went to the right students. So there's even ways to do it where students don't realize maybe everything is modified already for them. They might not know that. So there's definite ways to do that. So group 2 or the second group, I think there were only 2 of you in there. Did you guys come up with any accommodations or modifications that you currently use or that you are interested in using in the future by chance? All right, maybe group 2 is not here. So I just wanted to check and see if you guys have any questions or concerns for me. I wanted to show 2 more things. So first of all, this is attached in the slides, but this is just a nice, it's just a nice informational sheet that you can look at quickly. This is examples of accommodations and modifications, and they broke it down into different sections. So they did a really nice job. This first section here is just general accommodations. Nathan had mentioned books on tape. Here they are right here. So many examples here of general accommodations that could be used for a student or students. We talked about breaks as well. Those are all in there. This schedule can be very important as well. One thing I've seen in my high school setting is students on the spectrum, they really struggle when their day changes and it's not in a sequential order of what they're used to. So we like to prepare them ahead of time of the weeks and days are changing. Wednesday is going to be a modified schedule. So your classes are going to be 30 minutes long. I like to tell them in advance. So these are just general accommodations. As I scroll down, then they show tests and assessment accommodations. So that's really great to know when it comes to tests and assessments. And then finally, there are some general modifications listed. There are some behavior modifications listed as well. So this is located right inside the slides deck of my presentation. If this is hitting you and you would like to keep this, please make sure to bookmark it or copy and paste it over. The final resource I wanted to share with you guys is from the state of Minnesota. It is their accommodations manual. And I have scrolled down to page 32 already because I liked a couple of the materials here at the end. So on page 32, here's an accommodation decision tracking sheet. Here is inclusion needs that may require accommodation. So you can take a look at that. And what I really liked is it gave examples. So here are accommodations for instruction based on students with blind, low vision, or partial sight. So this could give you an idea for a specific disability area, how you might be able to help a student in your setting if they have that disability. So as you scroll down, then they have deaf, hard of hearing. They also have students that might have difficulty with their motor skills, communication disorder, reading disability, writing disability with spelling, mathematics, physical, and then easily distracted. So there's some great information in there as well for you. So I just wanted to close up with any questions or concerns that you guys may have. I want to make sure I answer them. Thank you for chiming in and being a part of my presentation and learning a little bit more about accommodations and modifications.
Darci, there is a question in the chat if you want to take a look at that.
Perfect. I will take a peek right now. Where is the balance between satisfying parents and fulfilling the IEP plan? What do you do when parents make requests that are not in the plans? So that does happen. And what's important to remember is it's a team decision. So it's that team getting together and supporting the student to make sure you all together are deciding what is best for them. So I've had to have this happen on both ends. I've had a request from parents I thought was a little outlandish and not normally an accommodation I would use, but we presented We talked at the IEP meeting, we discussed it out, and it ended up being appropriate for that student, so we used it. Accommodations should be specific to that student. I've also had to not be able to give, parents what they've wanted. In my district, for example, we are known for our sports, particularly hockey. I've been asked to include that in IEP plans that the student will be able to participate in extracurricular activities that happen outside of the school day. That isn't what that educational plan is for. Therefore, I didn't, and the IEP team didn't end up agreeing and going with it. But there are going to be times that you don't agree, and that's okay. But if you feel you couldn't handle the requests of a parent, that is where you might have a special education coordinator within your district. That is where you would then go to that administrator for their help and assistance. Because that IEP is a legal abiding document. So we want to make sure we follow what is written in there. So hopefully I answered your question. Okay. Are there any other questions that I can ask or help to answer?
I know at where I worked at all school programs, so the IEPs would extend to the program, but they also had to bring it over. They had to choose to share that with the program.
Oh, okay. Yes. And I mean, sometimes things are out of your control as well. I offer things to students all the time and they decide they don't want to do it. So they might have an accommodation of being pulled out to get the test read to them and they decide, that they don't want to come out. But certain things are definitely out of our control. Yes. We can only do what we are in control of, for sure. So, any other questions that I can answer before we log off? I appreciate you all logging in. It's been wonderful. So, if there's no other questions or concerns, please feel that you can log off and enjoy your afternoon. Thank you so much for chiming in and joining me. I appreciate it. So, have a wonderful day, everyone.